Welcome everyone to our winter composting workshop. As I said, we have a full house tonight and we have a lot of great information to share and some really good questions as well. People were able to submit questions on composting when they registered. So we will go through those at the end of this talk. And if during the talk you have more questions, you can submit them using the Zoom chat function. So if folks aren't familiar with that, you should be able just to take your mouse and hover at the bottom of your screen, and you'll see a little a word balloon, I call it, a little word balloon icon. And you just click on that and you type your question in. So we'll collect all those and we'll go through them at the end. Everyone is muted for this presentation because we have a lot of folks and we didn't want any background noise, but we will, like I said, go over your questions at the end. So before we begin, I just want to give credit to a few of these organizations here. We have Plymouth Area Renewable Energy Initiatives. They are also known by the acronym PARE. And you may have seen some of their work. They do solar energy installations. You might have seen a big solar park up at Common Man, Plymouth. That's their work. Or at the Whole Village on Highland Street, big solar array there. Again, their work. They also run the Local Foods Plymouth, which is a virtual online farmers market, runs all year round. And even in the dead of winter, you can still get carrots and eggs and great baked goodies and all sorts of things. So if you are not doing that, you might want to check it out. And then Little Gardens Everywhere is the newest program under PARE. And it's a program to really help people motivate to grow their own food. And we provide advice, workshops like this one, gardening tools, and opportunities for people to collaborate with other backyard gardeners. So really the purpose is to get more people to grow their own produce, to consume their own produce, when appropriate, share harvests, and really strengthen community connections. So that's about those organizations. And we couldn't do this workshop without our fantastic presenter and the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension. They have a lot of wonderful resources, and our presenter will be telling you more about those resources, so I won't get into that. I will introduce our presenter, Bob Richer, who's been a master gardener since 2008. And Bob, you can take it away.
Okay, good evening, folks. Thanks for coming. My name is Bob Richer, and I'm a New Hampshire master gardener and a compost fanatic. I'm originally from Rhode Island, a little place south of you guys, where my dad had a 1/4-acre garden from which we ate year round. I'm the chief cook and bottle washer at my house, and I love to eat. So as such, I keep what's called a forest garden going. It has trees, lots of berry bushes, and many different kinds of vegetable plots. And you may see a few of those tonight. That's enough about me. Thank you for paying attention to our waste stream. Since most of you are members of PARE, you probably want to find ways to save a little money and keep our soil healthy to provide nutrient-rich foods that you want to eat. That's what compost does through the work of nature's soil-based critters. Today, my focus will be creating compost with an eye on what to do in winter. Let's get started. Next slide, please. These are some of the questions that you've submitted. I've got them down on a sheet, but Lisa is going to be asking me, when we get to questions, she'll be asking me these questions and all the other questions that were submitted. So you don't need to read through these. We will get to them. I have more questions, of course, but we left a lot of time after the presentation to respond to your questions. And I reiterate that all you need to do is put your mouse somewhere on the bottom the presentation here, and you'll find a chat box. Next slide, please. Okay, I want to stress that this is your class. It has been designed by Pare staff, Amy Bailey, an avid gardener and good friend, and me. Having spent all of 37 years in and around the US Army, the way I teach is I tell you what I'm going to teach, compost, especially with an eye on winter. I tell you what I have, and then I tell you what we taught. So you will probably hear me repeat myself, but if you have your question in front of you, just listen and you may hear the response or may not. That's why we're doing the questions at the end. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to read this slide. The realization that no matter what you do, no matter how many mistakes you make, you are still probably going to come up with a reasonably good, usable compost. This is a quote from Stuart Campbell, who was an organic gardener. He was an author, actually. And I didn't look up his books, but this was given to me by the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension. We had over 60 slides and we cut it down to a few, and we're going to go through all of those. Next slide, please. All right, where do you start? What do you do with your kitchen scraps in winter? This is what I do with mine. The 5-gallon can in the upper right, you can see that it's got something in it. And all that is on my kitchen scraps, the ones that don't go to the worm farm, but we're not going to mention vermiculture. We're not going to be talking about vermiculture tonight because we don't have time. So what I do is I put scraps in there and I cover it with, you can see a big bag of shreds there. I shred all my mail, but the good stuff, not the plastic and not the shiny stuff. So the can in the red, you probably recognize it, with the screw-on cover. If I don't get a chance to go outside, maybe once every 2 weeks, I will fill that one up as well. And both of those cans last, each of them is about 2 weeks old. So I do get a chance to go out to my compost bin, dump whatever can I have, and then come back in and start over again. Next slide, please. All right, this is simply to show you the basics. You can pile up your stuff 3 feet wide, 3 feet long, 3 feet high. And if it's touching the ground, even in winter, there is activity down there. One of the questions is, can I add to my compost bin in winter? Yes. My suggestion is, and you will hear this again, is that you cover it with a tarp, which means every time it snows, try to get the snow off that tarp and put the tarp back on again. What I do with my compost bins is I try to get out there at least once a week and give them a couple of gallons of water, which come from indoors. I have a long line of cold water that comes out of the kitchen tap. As I told you, I'm the chief cook and bottle washer. So all that cold water gets collected. I get at least 1.5 quarts per meal. So that goes out onto the compost bins. Next slide, please. You probably recognize the one on the left. The reason I show you that it's the south side is that whenever it snows, I try to get out there and get the snow off so that you can see on the one on the right that I used newsprint in order for my weights, because rocks stick and so does wood. So if I use newspaper, all I got to do is leave some string and just pull it off, and it's easy to think. This bin, the 4x4 bin that you see, is all leaves with pipes going down so that there is less than a foot between the outside of the bin and where a pipe is. So there's probably 4 pipes in there. And that means that there's constant air being applied to what's going on in the bin. And because I have it covered with this thick black plastic, whenever the sun comes out, I get a little bit of heat. And that means that the critters will have a chance to move around a little bit. Now, some of you probably have the can that you see on the left side of your screen. I like this one because the critters don't get, the bigger critters like bears don't get in it. And it's very easy, even if it's frozen, to get off that black top. I just keep the snow off of it, and as soon as the warmth hits it, as soon as the sun hits it, even on a cloudy day, I could just hit the top of it and turn it and get to put my compost inside. Right now, that particular one is not even half full. This is a very basic compost bin. I know it is not as wide as I mentioned before, 3x3x3. Okay, but it does a very good job. I grow comfrey, COMFREY. It is about a 4 to 5 foot plant. It grows like crazy. And I use that as my greens. And I put about maybe 2 inches of greens, even weeds. And I put wood chips on top of that. And this thing last November was about 6 inches above the rim of the bin. And I point out the south side because I try to keep that side open in order for it to get a little bit of heat whenever the sun comes out. And I don't know why I didn't choose to cover it, but one of the tricks in winter is to cover it with something dark so that it gets heat every time. And I could even wrap it in plastic if that would work. All right, where to save your stuff. Now, I'm not advocating this, and I'll tell you why. Because if you take shredded greens and just leave them in a pile, they're going to smell, and they're going to smell terrible. My next door neighbor delivers his shredded grass clippings in the summertime. If I don't get to it in 2 days, when I dig into it, it is hot and it is smelly. So what I would do is I would put the green stuff on the left and keep adding the brown stuff to put on top. We do a 3-to-1 ratio by volume. So if you do 3 pitchforks full of green stuff, you got to do, 30 pitchfork. I mean, if you do 1 pitchfork of green, then you got to do 10 pitchforks of brown. And you can try to mix it as you feel it's right, but usually 10-to-1 works for me. Next slide, please. All right. The reason we talk about greens and browns is that your greens are mostly nitrogen. and your browns are mostly carbon. So the rule of thumb, 3 to 1, is just, I mean, if you don't have that much, don't worry about it. Just pile up your stuff. I mean, this is not, it is not rocket science. We do the best we can with the stuff that we have. And I will go on to say that those of you who like rhubarb, the rhubarb leaves are huge, and you get a lot of them in spring. And I love rhubarb, so it all gets canned. So I even use the rhubarb as some of my greens. Next slide, please. All right, here are some other things besides what comes out of your kitchen. What comes out of your kitchen is mostly on those pictures. But these are other suitable things. I like to use wood chips, sawdust, and wood ashes. Wood ashes because they come from a friend and my neighbor. Wood chips because I 3 to 4 years ago, the Espelunk people were in the neighborhood, and they delivered 35 loads of wood chips. So I'm really lucky. And for those of you who have a pile of wood chips, what I do in spring when it finally thaws is I put it through a 1/2-inch sieve that I have, a standing sieve, so that all I got to do is pitch something on the top of it and it rolls down, and I get a very good compost to put on top of my soil for free that came from the wood chips. Sawdust is another deal. I like to use sawdust in some of my paths because it takes a few years to break that stuff down enough for me to take it off the path and onto the garden. Okay, stone dust. That is a good addition to your garden as well as to the compost bin. And ashes I use on the garden and on the compost bin. It seems to add the potash that's needed to make a great compost. Next slide, please. All right, this is the stuff that does not belong on the compost bin. I'll let you read through that. It seems to make a lot of sense. Now, I want to stress towards the bottom, okay, first of all, the bacon fat, that is too much lipid, too much fat to go into the compost bin. If you're going to have a compost bin that you're going to let sit for 4 years, then that bacon fat will disappear. Coal ashes are a little bit heavy on the carbon, and it's actually a petroleum product. The human waste, that should be handled very, very carefully. And there are articles out there on humanure if you really want to do that. The lawn clippings that have been treated with herbicides, there's an herbicide out there which is a pyrrolid, which I've forgotten how to spell. Anyway, that'll kill your compost for maybe 3 years. And if you put that compost on the garden, it will kill your tomatoes or anything with a broad leaf for about 3 years before it breaks down. Well, actually, it doesn't really break down in the soil. It just gets leached out. Next slide, please. There are 2 really processes of composting: hot compost and cold compost. The hot compost, you probably heard about it. The recipe is important, 30-1. It requires a lot of turning. I've got a good slide next to show you how to do perfect compost. It finishes quicker. You can do it in 18 days. And it kills most weed seeds and pathogens. Next slide, please. Okay. Jeff Lawton is a permaculture teacher in Australia. All right, I want you to pay attention what's right near his forehead here. 1/3 brown, 1/3 green, and 1/3 manure. You keep taking one of each and you make your pile, and it's 1 square meter, which is 1 square yard, which is 3 by 3 by 3 feet. And you let it sit for 4 days. Then you flip it on the 4th day. Now, I want you to notice all the way on the upper right, a couple of hands squeezing something. You're squeezing your compost to make sure that it is wet. You get a couple of drops out of squeezing it. Now, I said this was a lot of work, and it is. All right. You flip it on the 6th day, the 8th day, the 10th, the 12th, the 14th, the 16th, and the 18th. All the time you are wetting it. All the time you are covering it with a cloth. You can see there on the lower right-hand corner. That's supposed to be a tarp. Now, what you get on your 18th day is something that's warm, dark brown, and usually, or it should be, you can't tell any of the materials that you have put in. All right. Now, this is the best way to do it. This is the hardest way to do it. And you've got to keep enough brown material, green material, and manure on hand. What Jeff does is he puts a lot of leaves or a lot of wood chips or a lot of sawdust in his chicken runs. And he uses that material for manure. And it's very hot. Okay, next slide, please. It requires a longer cure time. We've got 6 months to 2 years, depending on what you put in it. I have more or less takes a year for mine to really get to where I can use it in the garden, but I don't turn it. I mean, those barrels that I showed you, I have about 4 of those. To show you how crazy I am, I have about 16 different compost areas or bins. Right now, 10 of them are in use. And the ones that are barrels, I have about 3 of them. And all I do is turn them over in spring and dump them somewhere and let them sit topsy-turvy for 3 or 4 weeks before I use them. And normally my turnover time is May, because the rest of the time it's frozen. All right, longer cure time, and the weed seeds and pathogens may remain viable. If I get any weeds, I just pull them out and stick them on top of the garden to dry in the sun. And that normally takes care of it. I use both hot and cold methods. I've done Jeff's methods and it works, but I don't have the time to collect all that different types of material to get it done all at once. So I just pile stuff up. Next slide, please. It's a great way to recycle your waste. It produces great compost, because most of the stuff that comes out of your kitchen except for your paper towels. And I know someone out there doesn't use paper towels at all, and I commend her for it. It improves the soil health. Now, we can have a class later that talks about all the soil critters. We're going to touch on it tonight and only touch on it. And it lessens your reliance on chemical fertilizers. Chemical fertilizers are mostly salts. It's great if you want to start a garden and use chemical fertilizers and compost at the same time, where after a few years, you just do your compost. And then the chemical fertilizers get leached out. All right, next slide, please. Without bacteria, nothing happens in the pile. Now, I want you to notice the first one, the psychrophilic. I don't expect you to remember that word, but notice that these guys are working from 0 to 55 degrees. They have found them in the tundra. After a few days, if all of your compost is a perfect mix, you're going to get, probably up to 90 degrees. And then soon thereafter, I have hit 145 degrees when I pay attention to my mix. When I don't, I just let it sit there for a year and I get perfectly good compost. If you feel energetic like I used to, I would turn my compost piles no matter what's in them. And I have even deliberately made compost piles or just a pile of organic matter right near my trees, like within about 5 or 6 feet at the drip line. And then covered it with wood chips, of course. I've never had any trouble with critters, with the bigger critters. I've had mice and voles, but I've never had a bear come in the yard. The bears do come through the yard. I know they do. I see their footprints. I see their scat, but I've never had any problems. That's one of the questions. Okay, next slide, please. These are the 2 other critters that are working in, there they are, working in your compost bin. All right. Fungi, those are the little white filaments that you see when you garden. If you don't see them, they're there anyway. Actinomycetes are bacteria, but they're bacteria that act like fungi. They make, as you can see, they make filaments. And these guys work in conjunction with some of the bacteria. And when the bacteria are finished doing their thing, because they break down the more complex substances like the lignin and the little sticks that you put in there, or if you put wood chips in there, the fungi will get to that, as well as the actinomycetes. Okay, that's all I have to say here. Next slide, please. All right, how can you tell it's finished? All right, the biological reduction of organic wastes, all right, anything you put on the soil, okay, turns out to be humus. Now, it may take a few years to be humus, but it does happen. Somebody put in the Latin compost here. All compost means is to bring things together. What you're looking to make is a stabilized form of organic matter, which is another definition of humus. Now, I made the slowly really big because compost does take time. But we'll get to some questions that talk about that. Next slide, please. Slide talks about how can I tell it's finished? Well, I normally, as I mentioned before, if it's a pile of wood chips, that I got for free, I normally just sift through it, and all the stuff that is relatively small, I can use that either directly as a side dressing, which we'll see in a slide later, or I can use it just to put around my plants or over the whole garden. If I've got a lot of gardens that are just 4x4 or 4 foot by 8 feet. And so some of them I don't have a large area to cover. So I will just use that stuff because it's not finished and it's basically wood. So there's a lot of, it's great. It's great for my blueberries, and it's great for my aronia berries, and it's great for my apple trees, because those are the soils that really prefer a fungal base rather than a bacteria-based compost. You guys have seen, I'm sure, the 3-bin system, which works for me when I can fill up a whole bin. If I can fill up a whole bin 3x3x3, then I will let it sit. And when I feel like moving it, it gives me another place to move it to so that I can fill up the first one again. But I've never had enough material other than a whole bunch of wood chips. And there it is. Okay, just leave me that one. This is a fancy 3. Could you bring me the slide before that? Okay, all right, leave this one. As you can see, we start with a whole bunch of peelings, and you're going in your finished compost here. What it doesn't tell you is that you will see a little bit of shell, because that material takes a long time to break down. All right. Notice in the middle there, it says materials no longer actively composting. If it smells like soil, it is done. If it smells like humus, it is done. But compost is not soil. Soil is sand. My God, I'm losing it. Okay, soil is sand. And okay, help me out, guys. The 3 things that make soil.
Silt and clay.
Thank you. Okay. Sand, clay, and silt. And I have deposits of all 3 on my land. I do not dig them up because I think it's a waste, but I do dig up the muck that's at the bottom of these self-dug ponds, because that muck is a lot of minerals. And so I don't have to go out and buy minerals. I got plenty of that. Okay, now at the bottom here, it says measure the temperature of your pile. Okay, that's a lot of fun. It's nice to know what the temperature is, but if you're not gonna turn it, then that is a waste of buying this temperature probe. Okay, next slide, please. Now, I do 1, 2, 3 of these processes. I've never seen the one in the middle where you collect all your stuff in a big plastic bag. Unless that big plastic bag is open at the bottom and, you know, has some kind of contact with soil, then it wouldn't be good for me, because I want the critters to get up in the bottom of it. But I guess in winter, if you've got this big plastic bag outside, then it's either going to break or you're going to have some nice compost in spring, because it's all enclosed. And when you add water to it, it's going to stay there. Anyway, the bin all the way up to the right and left, upper left. if this bin had a pipe going through it down the middle that was about maybe 3 or 4 inches in diameter and had a whole bunch of holes in it, then that would break down really fast because the air can get to it. It's easy for you to keep it wet. And the critters would be perfectly happy working all summer. Now in the winter, of course, it'll freeze, but they'll still be working at the soil level. I'm currently doing the one at the lower left before it snowed, but now the snow covers the trenches that I've made to put my compost in. What's nice, if this had about 3 inches of soil on top of it, then the critters could work all winter, especially if it's got a foot of snow on it, which my gardens now have, 1 to 3 feet of snow. Then the critters work all winter at this compost. So you have fed them all winter and you're ready to plant in spring. All right, but it's all cold process, not the hot stuff. All right, sheet mulching. This is a good way to start a garden. And it's very easy. And as you can see, you just stack stuff. You stack the greens, you stack the manures, you stack the brown stuff. And if the top has that layer of brown stuff, like that straw, then normally you don't get weeds. And all you got to do in spring is dig a hole, get through that newspaper part, and it's not, even if it's a foot thick in the fall, it is not a foot thick in spring. A lot of it is broken down. You get through that newspaper and you dig and you plant right in the soil. And that works really well. I've done that for many people to start their gardens. Next slide, please. That's okay. The next slide, we should be talking about what went wrong. If your compost pile stinks, all right, it needs air and it probably needs more brown material. That means there's too much green in it. Here we go. Okay, strong. Oh, okay, I got the, whoop. All right. It's too wet, poor aeration. The solution is turn the pile, add some dry stuff. Okay, second thing. Okay, the pile is stuck. It's not heating up. All right, it needs more water. Water really makes the critters work more. The carbon, the brown to green stuff may be too high. Or the pile is too small. Add some water, add some more green stuff, and increase the pile to 3 by 3 by 3. Okay, the pile is attacked by scavengers. I normally don't have this trouble, but as you can see, they're attracted by meat and fat. Do not put your bacon fat in your compost bin. You may think it's really cool, but it really smells great to the critters. Now, the last note says to put a tarp over your pile. This is a great winter thing. The Europeans found many years ago that even if they get snow, which they don't get much of, at least the people that I follow in England and Ireland, they just cover it with a tarp, and whenever they go out to it, if they can dig in it, which most of the time in winter they can, all right, it's not frozen, but they just put stuff on top and put the tarp back on again, and it works. The compost bins that I have covered in that black thick plastic, I'm really interested in seeing what the bottom of that pile looks like in spring, because I made 4 of them out of the leaves that I collected in the fall. Now, someone who's listening, Dick Flanders, he's got a pile of leaves that are about maybe 8 to 10 feet high last time I saw it, maybe 20 feet wide, and maybe another 10 feet high or another 10 feet wide or in length. He's just got a big pile, and it's standing right next to a big pile of soil. So I'm sure there are critters going from the soil to the leaves and back again. But he can do that because he collects all his leaves, and he's got a Kubota to move them. Next slide, please. All right, use your compost. All right, upper right-hand corner, you can sprinkle your compost on the lawn. I think lawns are a waste. Of course I would. What that person is using is an aerator. Okay, somewhere down in the basement, I have the aerators that you put on your feet and you walk around your lawn. Well, I don't have a lawn any longer. All right, upper left, compost tea. I do this all the time, but I create compost tea out of my weeds and anything green that I can pick. I put it in a barrel. I cover the barrel. It smells terribly because it is all anaerobic. It's all without air. I add a little bit of molasses to it. I add a handful of either lime or the wood ash that people give me. And I just let it sit. It sits about a month. I can feed the whole garden on what I get after that month. I mix it about 20 to 1, and it is a good soil spray. You can make garden sprays, but I wouldn't use this spray on the plants where I eat the leaves. I'll do it on my tomatoes at the beginning before they have tomatoes on them, but once they have tomatoes on them, I won't do it. And notice lower left is your garden. Put it as a side dressing on the garden, even though it's not completely finished. Grab a handful, put it up to your nose. If it smells like humus, smells like soil, put it on your garden, right around the plants that you want to give a boost to, and then give them a good drink. And the lower right one, my guess is that, of course, is a perennial. And I always feed my perennials in spring. I give them a little bit of wood ash, and then I put unfinished wood chips around it, because I know the wood chips that are unfinished have bacteria and fungi in it. Next slide, please. Yay. Now, the University of New Hampshire wants you guys to know that you can go to their website, which I will show you next, and get information on all of these issues. I have looked at the ones on food safety, especially because I do a lot of canning. I try to can almost everything. Okay, next slide, please. All right, this is the propaganda one. I will leave this on for a little while before we get to questions. And at this point, I'm going to make a pitch. All right, I and about maybe 5 or 6 other master gardeners have a garden at Whole Village in Plymouth on Highland Street. It is, we have 4 gardens that are about 400 square feet each. And then we have another garden that is about 100 square foot, a circle in the middle of the other 4 gardens. And we need volunteers. But since it is a teaching garden, you can simply show up I'm there normally on Wednesdays from 9 until 10:30. And you can simply show up. I can show you the compost bins. I can show you how we grow food. Last year, we donated to either the food bank or people who needed food about 620 pounds of food. Doesn't seem like much, but there were no potatoes and no corn because we don't have too much luck with that. And potatoes are at the end of the season, and I prefer doing the beans and the peas and the tomatoes and the squash so that we can feed people during the season fresh food. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, we finally got to the questions page. I've already given my pitch, so we can go through the questions. Do you want me to go through without you asking me, or do you want to ask?
Whatever you'd like to do. I know
Okay, I think I would like for you to ask. Hopefully you got the same list that I do.
Okay. I know that you've answered some of these.
Well, yeah, but we're going to go through them anyway.
Okay. So question, it says, I want to ask about using rabbit poop. This is a cold manure based on vegetable matter. Bunnies don't eat flesh, but I'm careful to use it in my flower beds or shrubs because my understanding is that my primitive compost, any bacteria will not break down. Does that make
That's really strange. I really jump with joy when I find rabbit manure at the compost area in Plymouth. I haven't mentioned Plymouth yet, but Plymouth has a huge pile of compost in spring when things are all thawed out. But I go in the fall, and actually all year round, I visit when there's no snow a foot thick, of course. And I deliberately take bags of leaves and bring them home. Now, I live in the forest. I got plenty of leaves, but I always love a pile of leaves because you can use it for anything. You can use it to compost. You can use it simply to put on your soil a place where you intend to plant something next year, the year after, or the year after.
Okay, great. Here's one that
your rabbit manure, believe it or not, can go directly on the soil because from what I hear, it doesn't burn anything.
Good. Okay, this question I can relate to as well. It says, can there be too many coffee grounds in my compost?
Yes. Yes. What I do is I simply put in a bunch of green stuff, and then I cover it with a bunch of brown stuff. And then I put a handful of coffee grounds. Keep your coffee grounds handy year round. Even on my frozen pile, when I dump something on top, I got lots of paper in it, as I told you, because I use shreds. And I also use torn up newspaper that a friend gives me. And I use that as my carbon base, but I put coffee grounds on top because coffee grounds do 2 things. They add a lot of nitrogen, but there's a lot of other stuff they add, and they're finding out more and more that coffee grounds turn the soil acidic, and we have acid soil in New Hampshire anyway, but they add other stuff to the soil. They make it more friable, which means it breaks apart easier. There's more air in it. The roots get air. The critters get air. And they like wet and air at the same time.
Okay.
Okay, next.
Next. I like this, like we're trying to stump you, Bob.
No, that's okay. It's fun.
Where do I get the worms that can burrow through frozen ground to get to my compost?
Aha.
Yeah.
I know who sent that. This is a joke from a friend of mine, but when you make a compost bin, especially in winter, it is best if you have a part that touches the soil. It will get frozen all the way around, but I can guarantee that there's some activity happening either in the middle of the pile, if the pile is 3 by 3 by 3, and you just keep adding to it, or at the bottom of the pile where it touches the soil. You've heard the expression, if you build it, they will come. Well, the worms and the critters are just waiting for you to put organic matter on the soil. That's my critters pitch. Thank you.
Okay. You mentioned wood chips. Does it matter what type of tree the wood chips come from?
Oh, some people say that the wood chips that come from softwoods, like our evergreens. Now, the wood chips that I got from the Aspelunk folks, they just cut everything on the side of the road. So they were hashed up pine needles in there. There were hashed up leaves, hashed up little trees, as well as big chips. And I just let it sit. According to the studies, within 6 months, your pine stuff is okay to compost. So you could just let it sit for 6 months and then use it as one of your browns.
Okay. Next question. I have a compost container that spins. I thought that nothing composts under 40 degrees. Should I keep filling it up all winter?
Ah, okay. I don't like those, but somebody I know who has one just keeps adding to it all winter, but there's going to come a point where it's frozen and you can't move it. Otherwise you'll break the handle. That's what I hear. Anyway, so what I would do, I would keep spinning it until November. Then I would take the stuff out, which I assume is easy, and lay it on the ground, either in your garden where you could get to it in spring, or spread it all over the garden and let it compost all winter by itself. And if I had unfinished compost and a lot of it, I would put it on my garden and I would cover it with leaves. If the leaves don't work, cover it with newsprint, about six layers of newsprint, a piece of cardboard with rocks on it, or a tarp. Anything so that the critters can just get at your compost.
Okay, interesting.
And then let us know what you got in spring.
Okay. Next question, is it necessary to aerate the compost material?
Ooh, no, but I have been making compost bins lately. After 30 years, I find that if I've got a lot of air in there, the gallon and a half to 2 gallons that I add every week, I trudge through the snow, uncover it, take the snow off, take the cover off, give it some water, and the water keeps disappearing. There's no water that's left on top. So my assumption is it's not frozen all the way down.
Okay.
So something is making use of that water.
Interesting.
Does that answer the question?
I think it does.
Okay.
I have can we unmute Roz Lowen? Apparently she has a question.
I did unmute.
Oh,
Yeah, hi, Roz.
Hi. I was surprised that you're using paper towels from the kitchen and newspaper. The paper towels, sometimes there's grease on it. You still use it?
Oh, yes. Yes,
And,
we don't,
you know, because
we
you're
don't
picking up
cook.
things in the kitchen.
Yeah, we don't cook with a lot of oil. But what I do when I'm finished cooking, so the oil doesn't get in my water, I just take a paper towel and clean out what I can. That stuff is not enough. What I don't want to happen is I don't want you to go out there and pour like 4 to 6 ounces of bacon fat. The
Well,
paper
okay.
towels have always disappeared. Even in my worm bins, they've disappeared. I cook bacon in the oven, and then it ends up in the freezer because we don't eat a lot of bacon, but I want to cook a whole bunch at once because I want, if we're doing eggs, then I want to have bacon right there handy. So I just pop it in the microwave, it's done. So I take the paper towels and all of that gets, I take the parchment paper, and that I put on top of the worm bin, even though it's been exposed to fat, because that little amount of lipid is gobbled up by the critters that eat the lipids before the worms get to it. Because there are many critters that get to eat high. There are many critters that get to eat the lipids before the bacteria, or right after the bacteria get to it. And in a worm bin, there are many little things in there that we may not want to talk about before the worms eat it.
Okay, well, what about paper that has print on it? Doesn't the print have toxic
Oh,
toxic
no,
substances in it?
no, most of the newsprint you get today is soy-based. They changed to soy-based about, what, 10 years ago.
I'm old fashioned.
No, it's
Okay.
no, it's a good question. Many of the master gardeners that have these gardens that they need to keep up to make them pretty, okay, what they do before they add the mulch in spring, they put a 6 thick layer of newsprint on the soil, then they put the wood chips on top, and that saves us money. That, well, it saves me money when I go to use all the wood chips that I have. So I don't use as many wood chips. I put only about a 2-inch layer instead of putting a 4 to 5-inch layer to make sure that the weeds are suppressed. Good question.
Interesting. Thank you.
Okay, next question.
Bob, I'm looking at the other questions that were submitted in this
Yes,
you shared earlier, and I believe that you answered all the questions.
okay,
So
all
we can
right.
look up and see if there's any other questions out there. If people want to unmute themselves and ask.
Yeah, can I go through another pitch? All right, if I put something on the screen, if I hold up something, will everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay, does everybody see compost everything?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, this is by David the Good. And he is a fanatic composter, even more than me. Okay, I see compost everything backwards. Does everyone see it the right way?
Yes.
We see it
Oh,
right.
okay, good. Good. Now, David the Good. Okay, now, another way to make your critters happy in the soil is by the use of liquid fertilizers that you can make at home cheap. And I'm looking for my book. Hang in there a second. No, never mind. Okay, here is another one that I just bought. It's too expensive. It's regenerative soil. What you are doing when you put compost on your soil is you are regenerating, just like you regenerate the sun's power to make electricity, or the sun's power to heat your water, and I have both systems. You are regenerating the little critters in the soil. You're getting more of them. And what this guy is writing about is not only making compost, but using plants to feed the critters in the soil. Every single leaf, every single blade of grass is a solar collector. It takes carbon dioxide out of the air and the sunlight to make complex carbohydrates to feed the organic critters in the soil, to feed the fungi that are messing around with the roots, to feed the bacteria, which can be outside the roots or inside the roots. It feeds them these complex carbohydrates, or sometimes simple sugars. Like we love our maple syrup, don't we? At least I do.
Yeah.
And that is a complex carbohydrate. And so that's what's being fed to the critters in the soil. So whatever plant you put on top of the soil feeds those critters. So that's regenerative soil, as well as putting your compost down. That's why I go around in the fall and collect leaves, and I chop up big sticks in my yard to little sticks and simply put that on the soil. My gardens look very messy, but they feed us year round. I've got frozen tomatoes, canned tomatoes, dried tomatoes. I've got rhubarb that I mix with other berries that I grow in order to make the jelly that I eat the preserve that I eat every single morning. Okay, do we have any more questions before I go on and on?
I have a quick question, Bob. This is Sandra Jones.
Hi, Sandy.
Hi. You mentioned about wood ash, and like coffee grounds, can you put too much wood ash in your compost? Because in the winter, mine is mostly coffee grounds, wood ash, eggshells, and vegetable scraps. But I have a feeling I'm weighing it in one direction too far.
Yeah, you kind of need more brown.
Okay.
And brown, I don't know what your property is like, but brown is easy to get. Either you go around town collecting it, or you you collect it from your own property. I never have trouble with browns. I have trouble with greens. That's why I grow specific plants for greens. I grow sorrel, which grows and grows and grows, and it's delicious in salads. I grow comfrey, which is my favorite plant because I cut it down, grows about 4 or 5 feet high. I cut it down 4 times a year and use that to make compost. And I spoke about the rhubarb, and any weed I got ends up in that mix that I told you about that really stinks, that I got from Compost Everything. He calls it swamp water, and that's exactly what it is. I got it where nobody can smell it, and I mix it 20 to 1, and I don't know what the plants were on this year, but they were really happy. And I think I got maybe 120 pounds of winter squash that we're still eating.
And Bob, when you say add brown during the winter time, am I just taking a frozen pile of leaves underneath the snow and sticking it in my compost? Or am I needing to do more preparing in the fall for taking care of my compost in the winter?
I would have no trouble putting on any kind of leaf. It's just to give you a layer,
Okay.
because you got enough. I'm sure you've got enough ash, and I'm sure you got enough coffee grounds. But this is just another layer.
Okay.
Now, if you just keep throwing your ash and your stuff and piling it up, then as soon as you can get it in spring, as soon as it's thawed out, just mix it all together, and you will know the way it looks. You will know that it just isn't right. And
Okay.
then you can start adding this and that and this and that. But I got a feeling at the soil level and even in the middle of your pile, because I've got a pile out there, like I mentioned, Dick's, that is 10 feet high. Well, a lot is happening at the soil level because that ground is not frozen underneath.
Thank you.
Oh, please. That's why you pay me the big bucks. No. Master Gardening is free for all of you.
Right. So Bob, I just wanted to add a point
Hi.
about adding ash. Hi, about adding ash into compost or on the gardens.
Yes.
It's a really powerful punch. It happens really quickly. So like if your soil is really, really acidic and you want to raise the pH of it to make it a little sweeter, just a little bit sweeter, you can put that down, but it activates really quickly. Putting it in the compost will darken the compost very quickly, which is kind of exciting to see. But it also changes the chemistry of the compost, and it may create pest problems and disease problems in the garden if you've got too much ash in there.
Yeah, it's too sweet.
It's too sweet, but it also, I think it inhibits calcium, and then you can wind up with real problems with your tomatoes, for example. And we had this problem a couple of years ago. We burn wood for heat, and we have a lot of wood ash. If anybody ever wants any, please just let us know. And really, we had a terrible tomato year that year. That was 10 years, 12 years ago, maybe. But we traced it back to the fact that there was too much wood ash. So like anything, you want diversity. But
That's really strange,
yeah.
because there is calcium in wood ash.
Yeah, it screws with the soil. I mean, this is a long time ago, but I just want to like put it out there that wood ash should not be the only brown that goes into the compost bin. Just use a little bit.
Okay.
Like
Okay,
we
just
do like
a handful every layer should be plenty. What do you keep your wood ash in winter? What do you keep it in?
We keep it in cat food bags that are empty.
Okay.
And then we spread it. Then we spread it on, and birdseed bags. And then we spread it on the lawn in our orchard, and we mow that grass for mulch for the gardens. So it's sort of a cycle. That's the only reason we have lawn.
Okay. Is Bill still out there? Bill, are you still out there?
Here, Bob.
Oh. Okay. Do you use wood ash in the orchard?
I do. I also use a little in my compost bin, and I also use it where, like, for instance, I'm expanding my garden. So the new area, I'm laying out some wood ash there. But again, as Laura said, it's pretty potent stuff, and you've got to be judicious in how much you put down.
Okay, thank you. Bill is a master gardener as well as some other folks out there. And Laura, it's good to hear from you again.
Can you remind me regarding the whole village gardening sessions? I think I heard, I came in late, so I didn't quite get the full scoop there.
Okay, is this Dave? or is it-
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Dave. Hi, Bob. I think I heard Wednesdays, 9 to
Wednesdays
10:30,
from 9 to 10:30 a.m.
starting when and ending when?
Oh, well, that you're gonna have to monitor because we go out there when it's warm enough. So
Okay.
normally the beginning of May is good. I can start preparing the beds in May, and normally I ask for folks to show up on a Saturday morning so that we can prep the whole place in one day. And if I get 5 people, I am ecstatic because we could prep them all in one day, in one morning, as a matter of fact. 3 hours, 5 people, I'm happy.
How do we sign up for that?
Well,
So do you need help or it's,
yes, we do. And you can call Whole Village
okay,
and you can catch them online.
okay. Thank you.
And Bob, we'd be happy through Little Gardens Everywhere to announce any of your work days. We're developing a great list of people interested in learning more about gardening in the community. So if you
Yes,
just email,
yes. I will use and abuse anyone who comes to the garden.
Well, maybe,
Oh.
Sandra, since you're talking about sharing, helping out, I'd like to just share this last slide just with some contact information before we lose too many folks. Just because we have workshops that are happening on a monthly basis. And so if you want to stay in touch with us, you can do that through our Facebook, or you can email us. But in March, we're having a live stream cooking class. So this will be cooking with local produce. And that's happening in March. The specific date is to be determined, I believe. Is that right, Jen?
Yes, yep, we just need to finalize the date, but towards the end of March.
Okay. And then in April, we're going to be having an early spring planting and seed starting tips virtual workshop. So if you want to know more about that, you can contact us at our email or find us on Facebook at Little Gardens NH. But I could open this back up to questions. It seems like there's a lot of interesting questions out there.
I found my book. So if you could open it up, the pictures again,
Yeah.
then I can show them the book. Okay. Can you see that word?
Got him.
Jadam. It is Korean natural farming. You can get it on the internet. I bought the book. I don't remember how much it is. I don't think it broke the bank. And it is a way of, hi, Kathy. It is a way of doing farming cheaply. These people are dead against the chemical fertilizer folks, all right, which is kind of what most gardeners are into today. And it shows you how to make different liquid fertilizers. You can do your compost. You can use your compost to make tea, but there are other ways you can make compost with the stuff that comes out of your garden for free. And the one that I told you from Compost Everything, well, the Koreans have been doing it for years. Simply by putting different things in a barrel, let it sit, it stinks. But I found that at the after 2 months of it sitting there, it is black and it doesn't smell anymore. Now, I haven't tested it. I've used it on the garden. It's fantastic. I wouldn't spray my greens with it, but I would definitely feed the soil with it.
Hey, Bob,
Yes, Dick.
you might further describe where you get that great compost at Plymouth.
Oh, okay. Plymouth, it's the Plymouth Recycle Center.
Correct.
Okay. Dick, why don't you just go ahead, since you go every Sunday to bring your garbage. Oh, Dick is another master gardener here to help us out.
It's at the Plymouth Recycling Center. It's off Beach Hill Road, off Fairgrounds Road. And a lot of people think only Plymouth residents can access it, but that's not so. Bob is there just about every week, fills up his pickup truck with some goodies that we have there. And so, yeah, help yourself to it. Everybody can avail themselves of some really good mixed product. And it depends on the time of year and so on, but it has some really good material there. So it's just off Fairgrounds Road, Beach Hill Road on the way to Campton, right at the Campton line. Just go up into the recycling facility. It's where all Plymouth's trash is.
Yes, I do want to caution, a cautionary tale. All they do is mix all that material and let it rot. This is terrific, but there is one weed in there that used to drive me nuts. It is called lady's thumb because it looks like the leaves have a lady's thumb right in the middle of each leaf. But in searching through the internet what that weed was and what it does, it so happens that that leaf is called a nitrogen fixer, which means that if that weed does come up in your garden, you simply cut it all the way down at the base, at the soil level, and let the roots rot, because on the roots are little nodules of free nitrogen for your plants. But you will get a lot of other leaves. Hi, Louise. You will get a lot of other weeds with this. So if you put it on your soil, cover it with another mulch, cardboard, paper, anything you can cover it with, because it will give you a lot of weeds. That's why a lot of people don't use it. That's why I can get up to 5 truckloads of it anytime I want, because nobody wants it because they use it once and they got weeds. I don't care about weeds. I pick them, I throw them down on the ground. That's it. They're mulch. Okay, any other questions?
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Say good night, Dave.
Thank you.
Dick.
Good night, Dick. That was very educational.
Okay, if you have any ideas for any more workshops, just send them to Paray, and I'm sure that